Hey everybody, it's Paul Ramsey, Dr. Manny St. Victor, and we're going to be talking today. And for a few videos, we've been having a lot of people ask us about motivation lately. So we want to spend some time talking about motivation. And in my world, I spend a lot of time talking with clients about how to get more motivated to create the positive change they want. Manny has tons and tons of experience of trying to motivate patients to take better care of themselves and take action in their lives. So this is an important topic, and we care a lot about it. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say, Manny, though, because I have not ever... I've spent a lot of time studying how to help people get motivated, but I've never drilled deep into, like, what actually happens in your brain. Like, where does motivation really fire off at the neurological level? And here's this. First of all, hi, how are you?
I'm good. How you, Paul? You like dive right in.
I know. So here's my first thing that as I was preparing to talk to you about this, I kind of was just surprised that I never even really thought of this before. Would you actually call motivation an emotion?
I would because depending on it's the seed, the fuel behind your emotions. Because if you're someone where you don't like to feel emotions, you can be motivated to action really quickly. But once you get more self-aware, more mindful, you realize that when someone violates your core values or you behave in ways that are not consistent with your core values, that's when you get emotions of shame, anger, disgust. So think of it as like emotions are like an extended immune system to protect you from traveling to places and information not healthy to your core.
Well, okay, and help me work through this more, because I'm still kind of hung up. Like, and this just might be sort of my limiting model that I've adopted naturally over the years. Like, I think, all right, I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel angry. We say I feel motivated today, but I'm like, but do you really feel motivated? Or is it some sort of a drive, an urge? And even if it is, does that still make it emotion, or is it actually sort of is an emotion an urge?
Now, when it's done right, it would be passion, curiosity, and interest.
Okay.
So you feel curious about something, and the curiosity drives you to explore. And that usually means that you're at a certain level of development where you're open to change.
Okay.
Whereas if you feel fearful, if you feel kind of neurotic and bad affect about something, if you feel a high need for cognitive closure, that's an unhappy feeling. So that's at the opposite side. If you feel driven for power, you might not necessarily want to hear people's points of view and stuff, and you just want to be right, and you're not really motivated to explore the different models, because it all depends, like self-enhancement versus self-transcendence.
Yeah.
So it's like the goal frustration is what results in a lot of disappointment and some of the negative emotions too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And a lot of times I tend to be flexible with the models, because what you find is different systems use different models in order to kind of work their way through different thought landscapes.
Well, let's segue right there, because that's beautiful. So the other thing I was thinking about is almost always when you hear people talk about motivation, they sort of default to breaking it down into helping people be more aware of whether you're being intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated.
Yep.
And that's like maybe as deep as most folks will go, right, into thinking about how motivation works. But you sent me this fantastic article that made me think about motivation in a whole other way, this macro theory of human motivation. So let's talk about that, okay?
Okay.
All
Now,
right.
motivation is, in the end, about you have some goals, and you want to know where you got the goals from. The goals are coming from what's called top-down. They're coming from your brain. And you're either looking to act on them, looking to see the world to match them, or the bottom-up goals are things like avoid lying, food, opportunity to mate. So we discussed environmental deficiency syndrome a few videos back, as well as utilization behavior. These are things where things in the environment are more in control and they trigger your needs. A lot of the old trigger-based marketing was framed around that. So it's when the environment takes control. Now, if the environment triggers you to fulfill a need, what you would want to do is evoke your core values so that you devalue the item of temptation, like cocaine, alcohol, infidelity, or whatever is aligned with your survival in the culture. So by evoking your core goals, your core values, you are able to be intrinsically motivated. Now, usually people see that, okay, that's good, it's that simple. But you have to ask yourself, where did your core values come from? And your core values come from the environment, the cultural scripts that you adopted. Now, that's where the different kinds of motivation based on how autonomous, how much you feel like it's your choice, come into play. Now, the first one, which is the least autonomous, is external regulation. Laws, the highway tells you to drive a certain way, your religion, your culture, your boss, and even things like how much money you have, what you can afford. Those are all external regulated motivation. Fame, culture, I think I said that one already. Now, yeah. Introjection is when you internalize the stuff, but you also internalize it with shame, guilt, and whatever negative aspects that when the people that imposed it on you imposed it and defined you from the outside, you also took in the emotions, the resentment that you felt when you were taking on those behaviors because you didn't necessarily identify with them. Now, identification is the third model, the third element of how you basically take motivation going from extrinsic to intrinsic. Identification is when you see something or you see a group of people doing something and you realize it as similar enough to your identity that you weave the behavior into your identity as part of what you believe to be the right things for you to be doing. For the people around there, they value the same thing as you do, so you see yourself headed towards somewhere with them, if that makes sense. And the last part is assimilated motivation, at which point you've internalized it, you're passionate about it, you love it, and you feel good when you are doing the thing. You feel like you choose to do it. You're curious, you're interested, you explore.
I want to really like flesh that out further, because from when I read the article and even now talking with you, like, to me that seems like a really important part of what people often probably take for granted about motivation, and it's this idea of autonomy, right? That if you really look at a lot of areas in your life where you feel the least motivated, it seems to me like most often it's because you don't have a sense of autonomy, that you are not motivated to do all these things that have been put upon you by bosses, partners, family members, friends, kids, right? Like we all have a lot of responsibilities, right? Like,
yeah. And in the now habit, he says, stop doing the things you feel like you should be doing. Don't. Introjection feels like this. You have automatic negative thoughts that tell you you'll never be good enough, so you try harder. They tell you you weren't going to do it anyway. I didn't expect you to do it. It's like an internal critic. Your writing sucks, so you don't feel like writing, but you're pushing yourself to write anyway, criticizing yourself the whole way. Those are all introjected motivations. You're writing for money. You're writing for fame. You're writing or doing art to you impress people. You know, like when I was practicing medicine, I was practicing because as a younger person, I was more motivated by power, money, and
right.
And as you get older, you have to reevaluate your values. Reevaluate your values. I like that. But so if you introject the motivation, you take the motivation in with the feeling of being defined from the outside in. You might not necessarily be using your intuition, your passion, your sense of values, your awareness of data. Like, I'm a data person, so when I was practicing medicine, the further I moved on, the more I would be frustrated by a lot of the stuff that seemed to me like it was subjugating the patients to dependency on the medications.
Right.
Whereas if I looked at a more evidence-based approach, it would be like, okay, ideally you would teach people that it was not the medications, but them eating the right things, learning how to cook, learning how to talk to your kids in such a way so that you don't undermine them and nurture them, such that the next generation won't be dependent, another generation of patients, But so that would be an example of introjected motivation. I was, and it was pretty much extrinsic and introjected.
Yeah.
Where I'd be working, and I might not necessarily feel like being at my job, but I really like high-end cars and boats and stuff. But at some point, you start the emptiness is in the frustration, the sense that you need to be doing something that doesn't necessarily align with your core values. That's where the self-esteem destruction happens. That's the toxic part.
Controlled motivation.
Exactly, controlled motivation.
All right. So when you have a clear sense of autonomy, autonomous motivation occurs because you either have a clearly valued reason for doing the thing, and or you have a clear sense that you have the necessary competence to do the thing.
Yep, as well as the willingness to learn. If it's something that's outside your current capabilities, you have a curiosity for it, and you have not a fixed mindset, but a growth mindset, which is Carol Dweck's work talks about that.
Okay.
Where you're like, this is harder than what I know how to do, but through deliberate practice and mindfulness of what I'm doing wrong and listening to feedback with an open mind, I'll be able to eventually master that. So you don't destroy your self-esteem by feeling ashamed every time you make a mistake. You feel maybe guilt, depends, but you don't feel shame. And so you don't destroy your energy. You don't go into the third motivational state, which is amotivational. So that's what I think we should have mentioned earlier. It's extrinsic, intrinsic, and amotivational.
Right. So what we're trying to do, I feel like in this video, is go beyond the sort of popular notions of intrinsic and extrinsic, which tends to be like, is it internally driven or externally driven? And now we're going deeper and saying, well, that matters, but it also matters sort of not just where it comes from, but like what the quality of it is as well. Like, and your just more factors. There's more factors when you get into these three other things. Okay.
Yeah. And like we said, the next things I want to cover is people always hear passion, passion, passion. There's good passion, and then there's toxic passion, and then perfectionism. People hear that's bad, but not necessarily all bad. There's two types of perfectionism as well. So that's some stuff that we'll explore next week and the week after. But it's like you gotta dig deeper into the concept so that you're able to look at the nuances of the emotions. That's emotional intelligence.
Right.
Because passion, harmonious passion, leads to flow. You want to be in flow.
All right, let's not go there yet. Let's stay with what we're talking about tonight, and I want to get down to a real where the rubber meets the road, people, because I want to try to bring people with us here. So if people are faced with something in their life that they clearly have a sense that they're lacking motivation to do, how can you frame simple questions that they can ask themselves that will help them figure out what that's really all about? Because we want to give them a structure for how to assess what kind of motivation is needed.
Yeah, well, sometimes what you need to be motivated to do is get up and out of where you're stuck, because it will never make you happy, and it's draining the life source from you.
Right.
And that's a hard thing for people to understand, because initially you have to identify. You realize that you're in a particular group. You might be a member of a community, a member of a church, a member of a gang, or whatever, a gated community that acts a certain way. And at some point, certain things they call themselves to do, you don't feel like you want to do. Or even if you're living in a community where you get along with them and everything's fine, as you mature, you're going to, if you're striving for mastery, if you're in touch with your core values, you're going to be noticing things that the elders are missing. Okay, and at that point, even the master that trained you trained on the shoulders of different masters. That's the Flynn effect. Your master has a certain level of mastery, but the stuff that Einstein spent his whole life learning, I was able to learn through a couple semesters. So at some point, you'll have to realize that there's something driving you to look further, to be something greater. And that's the point at which you have to turn inwards and start seeing what in your belief system doesn't align with the existing things. And when you go to your intuition, when you go to your sense of logic, what do you find?
Right. Okay. That's a good place to wrap this up.
Yeah, man.
In our next video, take the next step, and we'll really focus on this idea that Manny's already sort of hinted at for us, this idea of passion. Where's your passion come from? How do you generate your passion? How do you climb into it and really access it and leverage it so that you've got the motivation that you need in all the good ways and all the right ways to do the things that you really want to do or that you know you need to do. You can still do those things passionately. So, cool. Dr. Manny St. Victor, so good. So good.
So good, Paul. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, man.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.